So, it's late. I want to ask you the following question. What do you associate mostly with? Being the hero in your story or the villain in your story? None. So you're a shadow. So I bet you've imagined yourself as the hero in your story, right? But somewhere, somehow, there's also a villain in your story. So just like in every movie or myth, it's about the hero's journey. So Joseph Campbell speaks about the hero's journey, and we're still having the villain wreak havoc over here. There we go. Okay, so I want to introduce you to the hero's journey, which is Joseph Campbell, right? And it's all about that call to adventure. Do we accept that call always? No. But what happens is a life-defining moment or an experience that forces us to heed that call. Essentially, it is about taking on a challenging adventure for growth. It's that quest to become better than what you were before. But what happens is we shame the villain. We see the villain as our antagonist. We see it as the one thing that is holding us back in our lives. But what if I asked you to consider if the path to self-mastery is absolutely embracing the darkness within you? So just like in the hero's journey, at the start of it, you have the call to adventure, you're in this ordinary world. And often it is rather the devil we know than the devil we don't. So we stay within those environments. And what we are asked to do is to step into the unknown. That's the initiation period. We're now being initiated. But we sometimes feel that we are alone in this journey. We're never quite alone. We are often mentors and guides and wise sages that's on that journey alongside us. But yet, we do need to understand that what comes with it is we're going to face our trials and darkness. It's part of that journey. We'll get back to the return until I introduce the next concept. Oh, wonderful. So before I delve into Carl Jung's shadow, I'd like to just introduce you to a little bit of context of why this is so meaningful to me around embracing that inner villain. Because we all need our wounds, our traumas, our pains to be witnessed. We show up in these superficial masks, in the mask of being the pleaser, the hero, the rescuer, the savior. We show up in the perfectionist, the hyperachiever, the controller. Sometimes we're moving into a hyper-rational state. Yet, these are the parts of ourselves that are necessary to be embraced, to welcome, because it is, as Carl Jung refers to it, it's the shadow side. But it's about integrating that hidden part of ourselves. Society asks us to put it aside, reject it, hide it. Don't show it to the world. We are asked to silence it. And so we show up in this way of what the world wants us to be. For me, my journey started when I finally made the conscious decision, and I say conscious, to consciously uncouple from my partner after 18 years of marriage. 23 years together, so I pretty much grew up with him. When I met my partner, it was all about finding somebody that I could connect with, having my own family, because I didn't come from knowing what it was to have a family. My dad does not know of my existence. And so for me, it was always about looking for, where do I fit in? How do I get credibility? Always chasing the next big thing to try and achieve success. And did I achieve success? Absolutely, along the way. But what happened was, how was I showing up in my relationships? So that shadow side of me was bearing grudges. I was wearing the weight of like a heavy backpack because I was the provider, the rescuer, the people pleaser, almost prostituting myself in all my relationships just so that I could feel like I fit in with this world. We're not alone in this. I'm sure each and every one of you have felt that making a decision in your life that somebody didn't agree with, or they felt it was harsh or heartless, didn't leave you in a state of people gravitating towards you. In fact, you were called to be the monster, the villain in the story. But the same goes for our public figures like, just to name two, Oprah and Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. had to face addiction. And really, he hit rock bottom. But he didn't ignore and deny that part of himself. In fact, he took it and turned it into a source of strength to redeem himself, to come back and emerge even stronger into a more powerful version of who he was meant to be. In the same way with Oprah. Oprah is the embodiment of turning pain into power. Better said as wounds into wisdom. She had deep trauma, so much so that the stats were against her. It was very unlikely for her to be where she is today. But she took that and she said, how do I turn it within? How do I turn that power from within and look at it as a mirror and a catalyst? Because every single experience, every person you meet, every relationship that you encounter is a mirror reflecting back to you. What is it that you need to face within yourself? What are the darkness that you've shamed? And what needs to be witnessed? So I decided to validate this. Instead of just making this an abstract concept, I chose to reach out to my social media networks, as well as I have a Sacred Sisterhood group that I work closely with. And the intent behind this is to really have an understanding of how our wounds, our traumas, our pains, and our darkness, our inner villain, is absolutely there as lessons and teachers for us. And as you can see from the poll, I think it was 90% of people said that embracing those darker aspects of themselves led to greater self-mastery, or in the very least, the start of their self-leadership transformation. Same with the survey. I think that was around 84%. Some had mixed feelings. So let's ask ourselves, why would there be some that saying, no, I don't believe I need to face the darker side of me? Most said that lack of awareness. They did not quite understand how it's a blind spot. They didn't understand that they were showing up with the darker sides of themselves. And at the same time, it is shamed in society, as I've mentioned. I'd like to introduce you to the framework that is used by positive intelligence. Shazad Shemaine speaks about two powerful forces within us: our saboteurs on the one end and our sage on the other. If you consider the saboteurs, it's much like the inner villain. Yet, what it's asking of us to do is not to shun it. It's asking us to connect with those parts of ourselves, to actually meaningfully embrace it and welcome it and befriend it. And just so for context, our saboteurs are formed from an early age as the protective guardians of our lives, right? So they certainly served us. If you've been a hyperachiever or a perfectionist, to some extent, for the most part, that has added value to your lives. You are not where you are today if it wasn't for some of your saboteurs to have led you to this part of your life. So with technology and with the villain as it's appearing, as we see now, it definitely has these three categories. What is the motivation behind it? So if you are in a controller or stickler or voider space, you absolutely, you want this independence. If you're looking for security, you're looking at the restless, the hypervigilant and hyper-rational. You're almost in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which is your people-pleasing, and the more recent brain science speaks to fainting. So for me, when I made that decision to consciously uncouple from my family after 18 years of marriage, I knew that I was seen as the villain. Breaking apart my home. And never in a million years would I have imagined I would do that, because I came from a home that was broken. So how then do I give up the very thing that was meaningful to me? How then do I sabotage all these relationships that were important? And what was I upholding? It was a mask. The mask of having it all together, the mask of everything's working out. Until the catalyst for me was, for those that are in the other parts of the world that don't know what retrenchment is, being laid off from work was being the catalyst. It was a loss of my identity. Who am I without my work if I was successful in my work? Who am I not without it? That became the catalyst for me to revisit all parts of myself and how I might be showing up. And so for me, I had the victim saboteur for very many years of my life. And I'm sure many can relate to feeling like a victim of these circumstances and projecting out into the world. It's everyone else but them, right? But yet what we are being asked to focus on when we reconnect with that shadow, with that darker aspect of ourselves, with that inner villain, is to say, thank you for serving me. How do I move forward with it? What do I need to do with this? What do I do in pursuit of it? What is the greater purpose behind it? So I ask you to consider whether it is leaving a job, leaving a relationship, or being confronted with either a friend or a boss betraying you, or any type of betrayal. What the inner villain does is we tend to respond with rage, out of fear and out of hurt, to protect ourselves. And yet we have to deal with the aftermath of how we had dealt with that. With the rage, with the anger, with the resentment. Because we are in so much pain. But it doesn't mean you've hit rock bottom, that you've got to stay there. We're being called to come home to the most truest, authentic expression of ourselves. And that does not mean denying the darker aspects of yourself, the villain. That means integrating it. So I ask you to consider, where in your life have you felt not heard, not understood? Where have you felt that you haven't been witnessed or validated? And do you feel that that is required outside of yourself? Or do you believe that by actually taking on this quest, like in the hero's journey, and stepping into that unknown, dying that metaphorical death, and feeding through the dark night of the soul experiences. And so, for context, the dark night of the soul experiences is what's referred to as loss, whether it is loss of income, loss of a loved one, whether it is any type of grief that you're having to face or experience. We are asked to accept that and embrace it and see it as, how is it meant to serve us? So I encourage you, when you're standing at the edge of a decision, be it a personal decision, a professional decision, or just when you're in a moment of doubt, embrace each of those parts of yourself. And just, somebody said they love acronyms, so do I. I believe that each and every person has that wow factor. And I'm not talking about the wow factor or the X factor like you would be on a show, a singing contest or a talent contest. I'm actually encouraging you and asking you to consider finding wonderment in observing your wounds, which is connected to this inner darkness and villain. Finding a way to be a warrior to overcome these wounds. Once again, that inner protagonist. We've all been faced with the inner critic feeling like an imposter. Gosh, before I did the TED Talk, I was like, oh my word, who am I showing up as here? And I quite frankly decided to put my slides away. Why? Because I needed to embrace the part of myself that was not feeling good enough or worthy enough, or the need to please, or the need to show up in a certain standard. And with that in mind, I decided, bring the fullest, most authentic expression of who I truly am, with my flaws, with my vulnerability. So I'd love to encourage you to consider taking the time to reflect more deeply. And what are those parts of yourself that you have shamed and that you continue to shame? Where do those parts need to be witnessed and acknowledged and seen and appreciated? And equally to name it, because as someone said, emotions is a feeling, but emotions is also energy in motion. So that energy that's in motion is certainly going to be stagnant and not take you to the highest expansion of living life in your truth and by design within your value system. So, see this inner villain as your path to self-mastery. Thank you.